Hi everybody. I'm joining you from Derbyshire. I'm Andrew Tebbs, an artist, visual artist, and one half of the collaboration that has created Habitats as Heritage. I'm going to try and start a presentation now, but this is new to me, so hopefully I can just share this, and then we'll talk through some prompts as slides as prompts, really. I think we're good to go. So Habitats as Heritage. Jane Darke and I work together as St Evil Archive. We're based in St Evil in North Cornwall, and for this project we worked closely with Kresen Kernow in Redruth to produce a body of work which is being exhibited at the Treasures Gallery in Redruth and also around the Crescent Kernow building. So we're both visual artists. We work in different fields, but we came together really to produce a piece of art which is really our interest in the natural history and the threats that are very immediate to us being on the coast in North Cornwall. We really think about global warming and the threat from climate change. So this is Trigonal Chapel. It's our base in St Evil, which is a rural parish. I think it was deconsecrated in 1982 and was left empty for a little while. And we've taken it on now to use it as a base for our artwork and our projects. We hold an archive of memories, photographs, and recorded conversations from people connected to the parish, and from that we became more interested in the natural habitat and the stories that they continually overlapped, and work became more focused on the natural world. So these images, this is Crescent Kernow, for those of you who don't know. Beautiful new bespoke building in the centre of Redruth, former brewery, but has really been brought into the 21st century with state-of-the-art equipment for preserving the archives of Cornwall. And we have been really lucky to be able to work with them and use material from the archive as we develop the exhibition. Feel free to jump in, Jane, if there's anything.
No, you're doing a great job.
Okay, thank you. I'll carry on. So the initial idea for the project came from, as I remember it, and Jane may, have a little bit more detail on this, but it was Crescent Kernow was
it was closing.
It was. I don't know if I'm just struggling over the.
Yeah, no.
It was the Cornwall Archive Office, wasn't it, or the Cornwall Records Office?
Cornwall Records Office in Truro was due to close because of the preparations for moving into the new building at Kresen Kernow. So, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to go there for a while, and having made a few trips there already to find records relating to St Evil, where Trigonal Chapel is, I thought I'd go and just have a real big delve and see what I could find. And while I was there, I came across this lovely, they're actually seaweeds from Jersey, but it was in this wonderful little folded paper book with a beautiful
like a
cover.
concertina book.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there are about 12 very small specimens of seaweed. And it just made me think, we were thinking about what to do at Trigonal Chapel, and we'd got some funding to do different workshops. And so we decided one of the workshops we would do would be to start a herbarium we collected recordings about the people, the place in St Evell. So we thought it would be a good idea to start collecting material about all the different plant species, which included seaweeds and trees in St Evell parish, to go alongside the people. So on the right, you can see that's St Evell herbarium. I think we have about 260 different specimens. And one of the workshops we did was pressing seaweed, which is actually quite a difficult thing to do. You have to press it between layers of muslin and keep changing the muslin over each day, really, because there's such a high water content in seaweed. We also did other workshops were making pots from the clay in the stream beds there. So this was the other big inspiration, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The exhibition.
Yeah. So as the label says, we've visited Marianne North, the exhibition in Kew Gardens. It's in a beautiful little gallery built by or funded by Marianne North herself to house her collection of paintings, and nearly 1,000 paintings that she made. As she travelled, she was Victorian lady, was able to travel the world painting, really, sending paintings back. In a time when there was no colour photography, the only source of colour images would have been original paintings. So these were quite a revelation to Victorian people, and are still, I think they've just recently been professionally cleaned so that the colours are so vibrant and displayed all together, grouped together in different habitats as she travelled. So there are sort of little groups that are labelled, you know,
it's more to do, her collection is to do with the countries that where she went, so the different continents, and she went to every continent, so they're grouped together according to the place, and so they do represent habitats to a certain extent, but I think they're more free-ranging over larger areas. But she tried to represent the insects and birds as well as the plants and the people too, which is a fascinating part of her collection.
So you could study these paintings in so many, you know, with interest in so many different things. So, you know, ethnographically, there are a lot of paintings of people working in the landscape and things like that. But we were particularly interested in how we would depict the plants and animals that we saw in St Evell, and this style of painting where they're shown in context in their environment was something that you know, for example, botanical illustration is really misses out on adding that detail. They're very often on a plain white background and don't show the context that the specimens are found in. And we thought this was, you know, an added element that we could include into our paintings, because we wanted to inspire people to value their local habitats and the local creatures.
And one interesting thing is that Hooker, who the man who was who ran Kew, who knew her father, who she knew, and Marianne North knew Darwin briefly, I think, but he said that some of the images that some of the places that she recorded in her paintings were already gone because the forests were being clear felled, or the landscape was being altered for agriculture. And that was one of the made us think that we could use this to show the vulnerability of the wildlife in well, anywhere really, in the face of climate change. That the landscape that we know now isn't guaranteed that it will be here 50 years from now if the temperature, as we experienced just a week ago, were to radically change.
So our idea evolved to, in some way, go in the footsteps of Marianne North and the plant hunters of the Victorian times, but translating that to contemporary times in our own parish, in our own backyard. We didn't want to add to air miles going all over the world to paint exotic species. We felt there was far more than we could possibly paint in the time we had it within our own parish, and we've managed to produce almost 100 paintings from just literally within 3 miles of the doorstep. So we are the Victorian Painters. We equipped ourselves with a bell tent, and we have painted actually 90 paintings, identified 9 habitats that we wanted to study within the parish of St Evil, and decided to paint 10 images from each of those, just to really try and illustrate the rich variety, even on an upturned stone, or sometimes looking at the whole landscape, sometimes looking very close in on maybe creatures in the leaf litter, so closing in as well as taking a wide view.
St Evil is a small parish. It's about 2.5 miles by 3.5 miles, and but it's coastal, with beaches and deep steep-sided valleys, which is where the only trees really grow, and a lot of arable land for farming, and one large settlement really, and farmhouses, and a few campsites being by the sea.
So it was a sort of an arbitrary choice of aiming for 10 paintings from each habitat, but each painting itself contains 3, 4, up to 6, 7 different species. We've tried to identify and illustrate accurately. So you can see that 90 was achievable within a sort of a 6-month period, but within that we'd probably identified closer to 500 different plants and animals in our small parish, and we've just scratched the surface. There's so many even quite common species that we've not yet painted, so
we're going to continue.
There's such a massive variety of things to see when you start. We've already collected over 200 specimens of plants for the herbarium, and everyone has a story of being interconnected with each other. So yeah, so we chose to focus in on the 9 habitats that we'll flick through, and each, what you'll see in each one is one of the paintings that's in the exhibition that illustrates that. So the first one is the littoral zone, and Jane, you might remember some of the species names in here.
Well, the raised yellow bubbles, the common name is the oyster thief, because they will grow on the shells of oysters and seemingly carry them away. There's the rockling down in the bottom corner. There was a question just now, did we have any botanical or scientific help? And Andrew studied biology as a degree originally in the 70s, and I did part of an Open University course on diversity. I mean, it's I mean, living in the parish, we covered plants that we had become interested with, or we tried to look for as much diversity as we could, and we used books and the internet to identify what we saw. So we are going to be having a series of workshops through August, which we'll tell you about later, and we have invited some specialists to come and talk about the wildlife during those. So this is on the beach at Porthcothan. This is a rock pipette picking out some maggots from the weed. This is something that's this is the beach where I live, and not every year, and sometimes once every 10 years, sometimes twice a year, get a massive dump of seaweed which can cover the whole beach and be over 1 meter deep, which lasts about a month, and then it's gone. But it provides the only nutrient for the plants that grow in the sand dunes, but also the kelp flies lay their maggots, which are eaten by various bird species, including this rock pipit, but also bass and mullets come in at high tide to eat the maggots. It's an amazing event, really.
Not appreciated by everybody, but but that's another story. And also the sort of the kelp strand, kelp holdfasts and the drying seaweed. It makes a windbreak which traps the sand, and it's the start of not only feeding the sand dunes, but it's the mechanical start for the four dunes to start to deposit the sand and build up.
The pioneer species grow up through it. It helps to bind the sand together to enable the pioneer species to take hold, such as sea rocket and auroch.
I'll move on to the next one. So obviously being a coastal parish, a big part of the edge of the land and the sea, we've got quite a lot of high cliffs, 100 up to maybe 150 feet in height, and Jane,
they're slate, so they're crumbling.
Yeah, so they're crumbling. So there are landslips and caves formed where the water can erode through from one deep bay to the next. Now Jane has told me the story for generations of her husband's family have watched the ravens nesting on the cliffs and wanted to take me to check whether the ravens were there this year. And we had a fantastic day lying on the cliff tops, watching the three ravens flying around. And The nest is there. We're not quite sure whether it was active at the time we were there, but that nesting site, that rocky ledge, has probably been used for 60, 70 years.
You can just see on the left a little brown nest tucked into the cliff.
I am actually pointing at it, but I don't think.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that's. But yeah, so there's a stack of twigs and branches that's built up year on year, and the ravens use it time after time.
So I was told about the nest by my father-in-law, Bob Darke, who was one of the founders of Cornwall Wildlife Trust, whose films, again, we're going to show during the residency, and films he made during the 1960s, 8mm films of St Eville wildlife. And he was born in 1912, and the nest was there all through his childhood and his life. So it's been there for more than 100 years, which is fantastic, I think.
Yeah. And they're such a fantastic bird to watch flying, and the aerobatics, they roll upside down, and yeah, quite a privilege to go and see them. So on top of the actual cliff face, we do have areas of really bleak, windswept coastal grassland just back from the cliff tops. It's not really arable land as such, because, you know, I think most seed would get blown out the ground. It would be difficult to cultivate it, but it is grazed quite a lot. This short grass on the cliff tops is prime territory for Cornwall's favourite birds, really. Unbelievably, Jane said that a few days ago down in Porthcothan there were a dozen choughs flying in Porthcothan.
On the opposite cliff to my house. Yeah, I just stepped out the door and there they were. It was amazing.
Pretty amazing.
So you can see in this painting, you see the little bumps on the land surface. Those are the ant hills of the meadow ant. And they're all over this exposed coastal grassland. And traditionally, this is seen to be what the chough would like to pick over, and we have seen them doing it.
And I think some of the anthills, that there's anecdotal evidence that the actual individual anthills, you know, are in the order of hundreds of years old. Not you know, they're not a temporary feature. They're quite long lasting.
Well, it takes a long time for a colony of ants to build a mound like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, can you also? So this this slide is entitled Cornish Hedges. As you may all be aware, or may not, the Cornish boundary fence or boundary hedge is a sort of a living wall. It's two dry stone walls leaning in against each other with a large packing in the center of earth rammed in between, and it's very often planted on top with shrubby trees like tamarisk and so on.
Blackthorn and hawthorn.
Yeah, blackthorn and hawthorn as well. They
and elder.
They bind the whole thing together, and it becomes an amazing haven for a lot of wildlife. and also because it presents, as the lanes meander around, they present north and south facing aspects for different, which favor different types of creatures, and it becomes like a corridor as well for a lot of creatures that that maybe need to connect between one small area of woodland and another. These sort of quite vegetative boundary walls are a link, a corridor for a lot of the wildlife to use.
Also sheltered places where a lot of the insects gather, so that you'll find the swallows will go along the lanes, and at night the bats.
And obviously we've depicted the barn owl cruising down the lane looking for any small rodents, or yeah. So this is one of the small waterways in St. Evil. It's quite overgrown and wooded along its edges, and this is not something we observed directly, but a colleague of Jane's, it wasn't a camera trap, was it? Did he actually?
No, he had his mobile phone with him.
Yeah, he actually saw it in the brook.
I got a still from his mobile, which was not. I had to kind of work a bit. The otter's head wasn't quite as clear as I would have liked it to be, so I had to use a lot of different images. But that the trees, the riverbank, the plants, and the otter's back and tail are exactly as they were in.
Yeah. So it's important that maybe I say that everything that we painted we had first-hand knowledge of. So either we'd experienced it ourselves, or a friend and neighbour maybe had passed us an image that they'd seen, but it was all from direct evidence. Nothing was sort of,
and all within the last 3 years. So I mean, I've seen curlews on the beach here 10, 15 years ago, but not recently. So, we were able to portray a whimbrel, but not a curlew for that reason.
We knew there were otters in the river because Jane had found a skull of an otter. So we knew they must have been there.
I'd seen their paw prints as well in the mud.
Yeah. So, but it was really nice to actually be able to work from a photograph of it in our location. And it's such a rich source. It's only a small brook, but we know that also, for example, elvers go up here. There's a lot of concern about the decline of the European eel. It's been decimated. Literally 10% of the eels that should be arriving are arriving here, but they are definitely alive and well coming into St. Evil. So that's just a really gratifying thing to be able to find and record that evidence, because it's not all doom and gloom. There are pockets of real optimistic stories that we have to make sure we don't let things happen to habitats like this. I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah. So this is further up the valley.
Yeah, so this is moving up the valley. The only places really in this sort of prevailing Atlantic winds that we get, the only places where trees can really develop are deep down in the steep valleys that are maybe too steep for farmers to have traditionally sort of been able to get into to cultivate. So there are little pockets of woodland that you know, have quite mature trees. And I think this is sort of an old, I think it's an old ash tree that you know, it's lost some of its branches, and it's got lots of ivy climbing up the stems and epiphytes growing, ferns growing on the branches, fungus growing in there as well. So you know, it's a real rich vegetation, and
it's very rarely visited as well. So
yeah,
because haven.
There's lots of food plants for insects and birds. So the ivy is a really amazing resource, and particularly in winter, it's really rich source of food for a lot of birds.
The berries.
The berries, yeah. Yeah. Move on to the next one.
Oil paints. We got we bought a lot of boards which were supported boards from a place called Sea White in Brighton, and we used oil paint. We covered them with a gesso layer and then painted in oil to just answer that question which just came up. So this is actually it's quite interesting. The high land in St Evell is there's a place called Bear Downs and Downhill, which was covered with landing strips during the Second World War, which is where the main village had been, and it's still fenced off by the MOD, but just very close to that is this marshland, which is on high ground. So it must just be that it's the water is held in by the rock underneath it. And it's actually a Cornwall Wildlife Trust reserve, very tiny reserve, but wonderful. And so this is there. So this is a red deer, and there are willow thickets all through it, and brambles and marsh thistle, and fleabane is the pale green plant coming up. And then there's a yellow vetch running through it all, which I think is a hairy vetch of some kind. But it's impenetrable for a large part of the year. So great for wildlife.
And Wellingtons are hardly sufficient, are they, in the winter?
No, God, no. There's a place right at the back of it which you cannot get into because it is just so boggy. It's phenomenal to find somewhere like that so high up, but you know, it's like a remnant of what the whole place must have been like before the airfield.
Let's move on. This might be the last of their habitats, is it?
Yeah, so this is the arable land, and there are hares all over St Evell parish, and doesn't often snow, but occasionally it does. And you know, you quite often see the hares dead on the road, but you do see them living a lot. And I'd just come out of my house and was going up the hill in my car, and two hares came out of the gate on the left and fought with each other right across the road, and then went out through a gate on the right. And I was, you know, everyone in the car was just, what did we just see? So, but I think it's wonderful to have hares here, and they're in this parish and the next 2 parishes, so they're spread out pretty wide through the fields. And yeah, so you can see there the field system in the distance, and how much St Eville is a patchwork, really, like so many other places. And the grassland is, you know, it's all farmland really now. There's there's one place up at the top of Bear Downs, which is actually just on the outside of the parish, which is where the wind turbines are, which is really the only bit, I think, of grassland which hasn't been ploughed at some time.
Okay, I'm going to move on to these are a couple of shots of the actual exhibition installed in place in the Treasures Gallery in Kresen Kernow. So we tried to, we weren't trying to copy Marianne North, but trying to keep some of the sense of the way that she had her paintings presented fairly close together, and really trying to sort of create a sense of that, you know, the mass of species that can be found in some of these habitats. So
the paintings cover 3 walls. There's this wall, the one on the right, and then another
a third wall
behind you.
Yeah.
And the cases, we asked 4 artists, 2 living near Redruth and 2 living near St Eville, if they would like to do a piece of work also. So we commissioned Molly Goldstrom and William Arnold. Molly did a drawing of plants. William made photographs of elms.
I think we have a close-up of that coming up, but
yeah,
just on the image on the right, you can actually see part of the concertina book that we referred to right at the start. That's in one of the cases in supporting the exhibition. And the other thing that I'm afraid I put the slides together and I've skipped over the remaining 10, the last 10 paintings that we did, because we were based in St Eville, but we were coming to Redruth. We you know, we felt we had to come and try and do the same, use the same approach and do 10 paintings of habitats in Redruth, and we walked around and tried to look for inspiration. I mean, one thing that I will say is that when you're not embedded in a place day and night, and you miss so much of the actual livestock that's out there. So we didn't see the foxes and the you know, the owls, or which I'm sure there are around Redruth. But one thing that we sort of became struck on was in comparison to St Eville, which is windswept, and the only trees that we have are sort of hidden down in the little valleys. There were some amazing mature trees in and amongst the buildings in Redruth.
Redruth is full of fantastic trees, just everywhere you look. It's it was wonderful, really, to explore the trees, and that's one thing we're going to do when we have a workshop, is do a walking tour around the trees during the residency, and make drawings of some of the trees that exist, all sorts of different trees. It's interesting, Chloe said that there was at one time they wanted to take photographs of how they had some photographs of Redruth 100 years ago, I think, and they wanted to show it now, but they couldn't because all the trees were in the way. And so Yeah, so we've done 10 paintings of Redruth, large paintings which show the trees.
So I think coming up after this, we do have pictures of the artwork that we commissioned, but coming back to the archive and supporting our exhibition, we looked at
went through the archive to look for references to trees, and I just looked through the lists, and then Chloe got some things out for us to look at, and from those we selected some really wonderful things about for example, how to plant elm trees, or this drawing, which is wonderful, is of how to lift a tree with its roots and transport it on a cart. You can see the guy in his top hat
yeah,
on the left. And then it's all just a written description of what you have to do. And then on the right, found some documents relating to the Second World War, when people all over Britain, I assume, were asked to gather herbs which could be used as medicine, and in Cornwall to gather seaweed, which was used for the substrate to grow penicillin, but also for iodine. And on the list, there's things such as foxglove seeds, digitalis, and nettles, all sorts of different plants, which were gathered in the different communities and taken to central places where they were sent off to be processed.
One fascinating fact that I was stuck in my mind was they collected 3/4 of a ton of foxglove seeds in Cornwall. I mean, it's just like dust. So how that came about, how they could collect so much is really interesting. So yeah, so here are some of the images of artworks that we had made by some of the other artists.
Yeah, the mussels in the center are made of silver and mounted into a ceramic rock. And on the right, you can see the tracks of the elm beetle, the beetle which spread Dutch elm disease, and views of the stars through elm trees and then birds' nests.
Yeah. So the one on the right shows the same 6 photographs from William. They're sort of laid out. That's how we were sort of laying them out on pieces of paper to try and work out if they would actually fit in the cases. So you know, the little purple lines around them are where we've marked the dimensions of the cases and so on. And that's in the bottom left is a picture. I'm afraid it's rather small, but it's a picture of Molly's really beautiful drawing. It doesn't do it justice there. It's so intricate and fine work.
Pen and ink.
Pen and ink, and it's her impressions of being in Redruth. Sort of a composite of different locations, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a plant, a weed growing out of the ground near the bus stop where she used to wait to go to work. And then the top of a headstone with the grass growing around it at St Uni churchyard, which is on the edge of Redruth, just next to Cambrai, where we did one of our workshops there. So yeah, we before the exhibition, we had workshops with various groups around Redruth and a couple near here. So this is one that we had with Why Don't You group for parents and their children. Okay. And this is with Shalal for Artists with Disabilities at Eluggan Churchyard, where we did printing, Tetra Pak printing, which was brilliant. Shalal brought along their printing press. And what we would do was gather insects with little pots which had breathing holes in the top, magnified lids, so that people could see the insect to draw it, or we looked at plants in detail. So this is another one of Molly's drawings that she did at the artist workshop at St Uni. You can see how intricate it is. There were all these little ladybird larvae all over the hogweed, making holes in it. So that's what she drew. And at Redry School, we had 14-year-olds in three classes. And it was with the bell tent, they came to us group by group. They would gather insects and then draw, or flowers, and draw what they found. It was fantastic. They were so absorbed in it. And their work is on a screen at Kresen Kernow at the moment. You can see it all there.
These are some of their work. They really created some beautiful.
Yeah, some really talented artists.
Yeah.
And then we had 2 days at St Mary's School where we had every class in the school with us over a 2-day period. And they have a wooded area to the side of their playground, which we went into to see what we could find. And again, we were amazed by their interest and what they produced. There were a lot of drawings of woodlice. Yes, they did love looking at the mini beasts. They loved it.
I think that may be the last slide. Yeah. So,
yeah.
So
somebody asked us while we were looking at those if we were making a book, and that is part of the project. We have put a book together, which we're going to be sending off to be printed soon. Hi, Martin.
I didn't see the the chat down the side. That had gone on my screen.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Sorry, I just dashed off to get my washing in because it started chucking it down with rain. It was all dry. And I was like, oh, I reckon I can do this in about 2 minutes. I spoke a bit too soon when I said greetings from sunny Falmouth earlier.